it's hard to believe that the Viper's over 30 years old already. I mean, when the car first came out, Bob Lutz had this idea. He wanted to do a modern Cobra. He even talked to Shelby. Shelby was kind of involved for a little bit, but he had some bad health at the time. The whole premise, though, was to take a big engine, a light car, a relatively unsophisticated chassis, and make a modern day Cobra. And that's exactly what they did with the first RT10s. In '92, when those cars came out, no air conditioning, no side windows, no ABS. They just didn't have any creature comforts. They were kind of tight, but they had a big 10-cylinder engine that made all sorts of torque. They had big fat tires. They had a car that handled, for back in the day, unbelievably well. And it kind of looked a little bit like a Cobra. I mean, some of that inspiration looks like a snake, and obviously that's their logo. So by '96, when the first coupes came out, well, again, they went back to Shelby and said, let's take some inspiration from the most significant Cobras ever built, the Daytona coupes. And the GTS, blue, white stripe, 2 gurney bubbles basically is what they were, trying to do with those little humps over the top. The thing looked a lot like a Daytona coupe, and quite frankly, it performed a lot like a Daytona coupe. When you look at what those cars did early on at Le Mans in all the GT2 racing, they were epic cars. They won everything. They won their class 24 hours of Le Mans. They won their class 24 hours of Nurburgring. They won the championship. Those cars were unbeatable, a lot like the Daytona coupes back in the day. Maybe that's why I like these cars so much. So between '02 and '06, they come out with the 3rd generation Viper. Now they've got huge horsepower. They finally make 500 horsepower out of these cars. They come out with the special editions, the Copperhead and the Mamba. The cars are still hot and unbelievable performance. Obviously by now they have proper windows, they have a proper roof, they have some creature comforts, but still not a whole ton of space. It is better than the original '96, but they're still a little bit tight. Then they come out with the Gen 4 Viper from '08 to 2010. Now they're making 600 horsepower, a huge leap in performance. They got a great 6-speed transmission in it. They set the lap record at the Nurburgring. This is the car to end all Vipers, or so we thought. Then they come out with the Gen 5 Viper. It's 645 horsepower out of an 8.4 liter, still has the 6-speed, but it's got all sorts of goodies. I mean, you've got the ACR, you got the GT, you got the SRT. You don't have a Roadster anymore, they're all coupes, but then they have extreme aero packages with cars like this. And I mean, it's got a giant wing, it's got the canards in the front, it's got a giant splitter. And in 2015, they have this custom package available where you can order just about any color that you want, any interior kind of materials that you want. They go full bore custom. Not everybody took advantage of it, but you could spend a lot of money on a Viper. Keep in mind, it's not a Ferrari, it's not a Porsche, even though it outperformed all of those cars. This car was a monster. They end production in 2017 with the GTSR, the commemorative edition, and it's the final swan song. It's the end of an era, and what an era. The car had so much going for it. It's a shame that they lost it, but let's face it, the world was going electric. Everybody was talking about the new electric cars. This car, I think, is a super future collectible. If you go back to the '96, which I think is still one of the purest, prettiest cars, it looks like a Daytona coupe, the 10-cylinder, just the rawness of those cars. Those cars are relatively inexpensive. They're under 100 grand for great ones, and I mean delivery mile cars. I think those cars have a long way to go. I raced an ACRX at a couple of races. Phenomenal car. Years ago when we were at Bondurant's, they had the ACRs and the ACRXs and got to spend a couple days in them. Again, phenomenal car, bang for the buck. I don't think there's anything better out there. And just this raw feel, it's a car that, doesn't feel like it's got all sorts of gadgets to keep you in check. It's a car that you drive, and when you drive it well, the car is unbelievably fast. So this car here, Gary's gonna take it for a spin. It's a 2016 ACR with the Extreme Aero package. It's got the painted stripe. It's got some really cool options. And I'll tell you, the last Gen 5s, they're the most comfortable to drive. The early cars, even a guy my size, you're kind of cramped in there. This one is really comfortable. There's plenty of space. It's a little bit wider. It's a little bit more legroom, a ton more headroom. It's a really fun, comfortable car to drive. I think he's gonna really enjoy it. And keep in mind, You know, 2016, this car still holds the track record for an American car rear-wheel drive with a stick at a 7:01 at the Nurburgring. I mean, phenomenally fast. I think Gary's gonna really enjoy this car.
So today I get to drive this 2016 Viper ACR. Now, I've driven these cars a handful of times on different racetracks, but that was 5 or 6 years ago. So I know what to expect, and I'm very much expecting it. Gonna get in this thing, and you definitely want to be in a good driving position for this car, because yeah, you've got to drive it. There's no other car that sounds like that when you fire it up. All right, let's go. This thing is a serious car. And if you've never driven one, you think, okay, yeah, naturally aspirated V10, 649 horsepower. That's what makes this car so exciting. But if you've driven one of these cars, you know, quickly on the street or really hard on the track, you realize what makes this car so special is how well this car stops and how well this car turns. You know, with the extreme aero package, 2,000 pounds of downforce, my goodness, this car at 9/10, you know, at full song on the racetrack, feels like an Indy car around the corners. Looking at it, you know, you expect to be driving this car fast and it'll be, you know, all kinds out of shape, it'll be sideways. Absolutely not the case. This car, when you're driving fast, is precise. You point your hands where you want the car to go and it goes there. If you're sideways, you're going slow. This car is stuck to the track. Man, oh man. You can see how guys get in trouble in these cars. There's just so much power, so much torque. You can spin the tires on command, you know, in first, second, third gear. You gotta have a whole lot of respect for these things. Now, it's funny driving this car on the road. I'm glad that I've driven it a bunch on the track. See, years ago, we would go down to Bondurant Racing School down in Arizona right after the Barrett-Jackson auctions, and this is what we were driving. So I've done a handful of days, maybe 4 or 6 days on track all day, beating the absolute snot out of these cars. And man, they are a serious, serious track car. But what's funny is you get on the road and you can get on a highway and be up to speed in first gear. It's ridiculous that it's a 6-speed. I'm cruising right now, you know, going relatively quick in second gear. I don't need third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, sixth gear. I bet you I could drive on the highway without my foot on the gas in 6th gear. It would idle along at 100 kilometers an hour. And okay, it's not like the V10 8.4 liter engine is not impressive. What's most impressive, because of the giant displacement, is the 649 horsepower matched with the 600 foot-pounds of torque. The car just pulls like a freight train in every gear. Oh, that's good. And it's just this monstrous rumbling noise. You know, it's not like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini that's this, you know, high-pitched whoop-ah. This thing is just threatening. What's neat, something I've never noticed on this car before, is you do your blip on the downshift And going now, it leaves a little blue dot for what RPM you brought it to during the blip. So you know that if you over rev the blip, you know, say on the last lap in corner 2, you remember that it was 4,200 RPM you brought it to. You only need to go to 3,900 RPM. Kind of a cool little feature. The ride on the car, just on the street, is actually fairly pleasant. The big Bilstein shocks, 10 adjustments for compression and dampening, kind of gives you, you know, certainly skewed towards a good racetrack experience, but not bad on the street. You know, and just driving this car, I feel like I'm at home. The seat is perfect, hand position is perfect, the distance. You've got the power option to move the pedals fore and aft, and the distance between the pedals is just perfect. I've got a nice solid dead pedal down here. I can toe heel no problem, because let's face it, if you're doing a big downshift here, if you're not on top of things, this car will bite you. Yeah, that's good. Kind of a scary car to drive, honestly. It's just such a monster in every respect. Man, that was fun. That was fun. Yeah, my ears are my ears are ringing. Oh, well, guess we got to ask ourselves the question now. Do you need a car like this? No. No, you definitely don't need a Viper ACR, you know, a V10 naturally aspirated absolute weapon. No, you don't need a car like this. Oh, you want a car like this though. You absolutely do.